All right, everybody, welcome back to Beans No Ball. First post Super Bowl episode gonna have here, and obviously, like we mentioned, kind of just want to wrap up the season as a whole. So we'll just, what we say, Christian, just run through each division, kind of give some takes on how everything went. Maybe we'll look into some of our predictions from early season, and let's just get this thing started.
Yeah, so obviously like you said, we're gonna run down to these teams as quick as possible. Hopefully, not too much yapping there, but obviously let's kick it out right with the AFC and let's start off with the East here. Now, obviously, divisional winner, the Buffalo Bills team. Now, this was a team that, there was it was a very up and down team to start of the season. I mean, in the mid-season, they were 6-6. There's really no hope coming for this Buffalo Bills team.
We basically lost hope on them from then.
Yeah, I basically lost hope for them. Dolphins, they look pretty much good with the division here. I mean, they were 3 games ahead of the Bills during that time, especially during that stretch towards the end of the season. But, the following week, Buffalo Bills, they had a huge game against my Cowboys team, and that was a very must win for the Bills team. And I know how you said it. I know you said it, Barry. If the Bills win that game, they'll probably be good for playoffs. And you were indeed correct. After that Cowboys win, it really built momentum. I mean, beating a very high-powered team, getting that momentum going, and finishing out the season strong, and getting the division over this Miami Dolphins team. Obviously, they had the game against the Steelers. It looked really well too, but really couldn't get it done against the. I just had a brain fart. It was against the Chiefs. Against the Chiefs.
Which, of course, whenever it came to facing Mahomes for Allen and, for this team in general, it seems to just be their kryptonite. So, you can't hold it too much against them there. Sure, everyone, that's just the thing. Everyone started down the Chiefs. Yeah. Look what ended up happening there. But, of course, we're going to really look at, a downfall. It was 2 different things in this division when it came from, the Bills coming up from expected nothing, and then the Dolphins, they were expected, to run away with this division with the struggles that the Bills were coming through. And, I was making comments for Tua maybe being an MVP candidate from the start of the season. That obviously didn't come to pass from what, that whole second half. It just really, he just really fell off a cliff. That obviously became a narrative that we really kept hitting on over and over again. But just to look back, I was just looking over at our predictions. I actually hit on both the Bills and the Dolphins. To start, pat myself on the back there. The bottom half of the division, I kind of went overboard on the wins for both these teams. Looking at the Jets, obviously season was derailed from the start when we see, the whole Aaron Rodgers situation. But obviously they failed to plan for a situation like this. And obviously, they just brought in guys like, Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard, which those were disasters. And overall, the way they handle Zach Wilson was a disaster. Just everything as a whole. I'm surprised Robert Saleh hasn't been getting more calls to be on the hot seat. Obviously, this season is probably going to be make or break for him. So we'll just have to wait and see how it's going to be going into next year. What happens with the Jets?
Yeah, obviously. Now, other than now moving on to the losing side of this division, the New York Jets. Now, the New York Jets. I looking back into my predictions, I expected the Jets to miss the playoffs. Even with Aaron Rodgers and even without Rodgers now from that week 1 injury with his Achilles, that was a huge detriment to this Jets team. everyone had high hopes for this Jets team. Garrett Wilson, he was another player that really, really wanted Aaron Rodgers here. But that injury and the way they treated Zach Wilson here, Zach Wilson, he did all he could. He really did all he could. I was really rooting for Zach Wilson, towards later in the season, but he just wasn't doing his job. He wasn't getting it going, and it just really sucks to see. And I really don't expect Zach Wilson to run this team at the start of next season. Aaron Rodgers, we just gotta wait to see what he does next season. And 7-10, a repeat record of last season. But I'm pretty sure Robert Saleh can cook up something this offseason for the Jets to be back on track.
Of course, probably the most disappointing team in this division, the New England Patriots. Even worse than the Jets, man. All things considered, there were no expectations, so you can't say too much about them. But Bill Belichick, what a sad way to go out, man. Just a historic career he had in what they go 4-13, I believe it was.
4-13. Yep.
Yeah. So it was just like I said, horrible way to go out for him. Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, did those quarterback situations really ugly. So obviously we're gonna have a lot of draft coverage. We'll see, what they do with that 3rd overall pick. But as a whole, the receiver corps obviously absolutely non-existent. There's just we can go on and on what was wrong with this team, but hey, they got Gerard Mayo. Obviously looks like a stout hire for them going forward. They actually have a real general manager, not Bill Belichick calling the shots now. So things are looking up. We'll see how long this rebuild does go, but things are expected to look a little better for them.
Yeah, this team is still young. Don't get me wrong. They have like I said, they have a top 3 pick, the 3rd pick coming in the draft. You would expect them to take a quarterback like Drake May. Who knows? We'll also get into that later on, in the next couple of weeks. But like you said, Mac Jones, really all start with Mac Jones. Like, sure, don't get me wrong. The first 2 weeks, Mac Jones, even though they came up to start 0-2, Mac Jones played like, decently well those 2 games. And then once he hit that Cowboys game, he started being horrible. And then moving on from that, he just really wasn't getting the work done, getting benched. This defense, the reason, like, let's look at this. The defense was the reason they were getting in close games. If it wasn't a blowout, it was a close game, and it was because of this defense. The offense wasn't producing, like you said, with those receivers. Really hated to see Juju Smith-Schuster not make a big impact on that Patriots receiving come. It was Juju, N'Keal Harris,
was it Kendrick Bourne that went down with
Kendrick Bourne
ACL injury early in the season?
Kendrick Bourne as well.
Arguably, that probably fed into this dismantling.
Yeah, that offense was really the focal point why this Patriots team really didn't succeeded, and it really sucked to see Bill Belichick come out on a loss, especially against a Jets team that he had a lot of history in beating. And now moving on to the AFC North with the division where the Baltimore Ravens. Now this Ravens team, they were looking pretty good. Don't get me wrong with Lamar Jackson coming back from his injury, he was looking a little rusty in the first couple of weeks. I know we call Lamar Jackson to cost him a couple games, but we started speculating, especially against the Colts team, in the beginning of the weeks. He wasn't looking that well. I mean, his use, but it was I think he had a couple games.
Overall, this season, I think we had a lot of games that we could kind of think, he's probably doesn't look like that MVP talent, and obviously that's why he's looked at probably one of the one of the weakest MVP campaigns ever right now.
Yeah, not even that. I mean, just with the quarterback play in general this whole season. But I mean, come on, when we're coming mid-season, when we did the mid-season analysis, he was sub 2,000, barely sub 2,000 pass yards, if I'm not mistaken, like about 1,800. And you call him to win the MVP, so give you your flowers there. But if we want to really look into this, it's that defense of that Ravens team. That defense of the Ravens team really had a huge step up, especially after mid-season. Really, that's kind of where less pressure came off of Lamar Jackson, especially with J.K. Dobbins coming out early out in the season. The run game was it wasn't that high powered. But Lamar
week 1, I think.
Yeah, that's why in the early in the season, Dobbins went down, so that run game wasn't going to look that well. But Lamar Jackson, arguably the best running quarterback in the league. Running back allegations, call him whatever you want. He did what he can for the running game. Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, they picked him a little bit, but obviously it just sucked to see that he really couldn't do a little bit better more in the AFC Conference Championship, especially against a Chiefs team that can't really count Mahomes out.
Yeah, and obviously a big part of this resurgence was hiring Todd Monken. Obviously they've been. Forgot who was Greg Roman was their offensive coordinator for years. It was thought that maybe he was holding him back for a bit, and Todd Monken's offense really did, I guess you could say, unleash him. Even though we already saw so much of what he could do after 2019, this season we could arguably say we really saw a full potential Lamar Jackson. Sure, he really wasn't as good as we probably would have expected. Probably wasn't even as good as that 19 season, but he was kind of unleashed, let him do his own thing, and we saw a lot of great things, but we also saw a lot of mediocre play. We saw. It was a mixed bag for him this season, and obviously, it was it's those jokes we saw for the way they played in that in the AFC Championship. The way I guess he tried beating him with his arm, didn't really play to his strengths. That was kind of what does fall and a concern that he does have to fall back on. Sometimes he tries doing too much. And he tries, trying to prove himself as a passer instead of just playing to his strengths. And if we see him do that a little more next season, I think we're going to see a lot more, probably a better chance for the Ravens.
Even the receiver. Just a quick thing too. Even the receiving court. And that's another thing I forgot. They have some, couple problems with drops. Zay Flowers, Odell.
OBJ
Zay
really
Flowers,
did not live up to that potential.
Yeah. Yeah, Zay Flowers, he's still gonna look like a potential, hopefully a top 15 receiver in the near future. Really have high hope for Zay Flowers. Yeah,
we can. It's hard. He did, probably fumble.
Yeah, that was the big game changer. But I still have a lot of high hopes.
Overall, the way he's playing the AFC Championship, it wasn't the best. But at the same time, we can't base it off just that one game. He has such a huge potential moving forward, and he's gonna be a huge weapon for him. Yeah. But moving into, probably one of the bigger surprises this season, the Browns. Probably took, so many awards in the NFL honors. Coach of the Year in Stefanski. A little arguable, but Myles Garrett, Defensive Player of the Year. Joe Flacco.
Oh yeah, that was definitely arguable, man.
Obviously should have gone into another team that we're gonna get into in a little bit. But I mean, hey, I mean, as much as it probably wasn't deserved, I mean, he played a phenomenal season this year. I mean, it was, you know, the talks. We were talking about this a lot since midseason. I mean, this was your pick midseason to win defensive player, and I mean, we can see why. Kind of turned into probably, you know, just the best player on the best defense, and you know, can't argue with that at times. You know, it's just, you know, what TJ Watt did. It really does take away from it, but. I mean, hey, taken to see, you know, what the Browns did. I mean, they after Deshaun Watson went down, Thompson
Robinson had a lot of
went
injuries.
down.
You know, the O-line, the quarterback, some key defensive players also went on. Stefanski,
I mean, they led the league in
injuries,
around, right, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, they did lead the league.
Yeah.
I don't know an exact number, but I know it was a very hefty amount.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, and that's the thing. You know, all the adversity they faced. I mean, just being the Browns as a whole. I mean, that's just about enough that we've kind of gotten to see over the years. But I mean, to see, you know, they got in as the 5 seed. I mean, they were still really close to winning the division if it wasn't for, you know, the Ravens being so dominant. And sure, you know, they ran into CJ Stroud. I mean, you know, just him, that's just another thing that we're just going to get into right now. But regardless, I think, I mean, as much as I want to say the future's so bright for the Browns, that quarterback situation is going to come back to bite them in the ass. Who knows what they're going to do next season, you know, with the contract situation with Watson. And I mean, obviously it's not going to be Flacco, but, you know, just looking at that contract, I mean, are they going to try to eat it? Are they going to, you know, really try to work with it? But I mean, regardless, it's a lot of concerns looking into the Browns for next season.
Yeah, say what you want. What happened to the defense with this Browns team, but this was honestly a very W season for this Browns team. I mean, like we said, the injuries that really killed them, and then the whole quarterback carousel that it go through. Stefanski, you know, I would say, you know, well deserved. I would say he was well deserved of that award. Having to deal with so many adjustments and had to pull through that, and still walking away with an 11-6 record. Obviously, could have capitalized that in the wild card, but you know, enough said. There is still some hope for the Browns in the future, especially with that young defense. And this defense, don't get me wrong, it's still good. They just couldn't perform when they really needed to. And, you know, like you said, the quarterback situation, it's going to be Deshaun. I mean, they spent all that money on him, but, you know, we really don't know if Deshaun Watson is going to be that guy for them. Yeah, we don't know. And speaking of another thing with the quarterback situation, moving on to the Steelers team. Now, the Steelers team, I mean, let's get right here. This offense, it was not clicking, and they somehow managed to still be 6-3 commit season. I mean, this was just, you know, I already forgot the coordinator, Matt Canada. There you go. Matt Canada, he was really, I mean, say what you want. Was he holding this offense back? Was he not? I mean, even with his departure,
he should have started on the sideline since the start of the season.
Yeah, I mean, come on, sideline Matt. You know, the whole meme there was sideline Matt. But I mean, even with his departure, you know, the offense still wasn't, you know, clicking as much. Pickens, he wasn't getting as much receptions until that one freaking playoff. So the one game where, you know, Pickens decided to be good and everything, but and the TJ Watt, I mean, you know, he should have won the defensive player. We've been over that already here. That defense, you know, I'm not gonna say
that was a bright spot in their season. I mean, sure. I mean, TJ Watt, Joey Porter Jr. really being a great
TJ
bright
Watt
spot.
was, Joey Porter, that was really one guy I was really looking forward to this season. And he as a rookie, what he was able to do in the coverage, I think man coverage was his strong point this season, if I'm not mistaken. He was really locking up some top receivers in this league. So Joey Porter coming into the next season, he's really going to make a big impact for that secondary. Because who knows, you know, there's a lot of washed players on that defense, you know, starting out with Patrick Peterson. I don't know why the hell he's still playing. Like, he was getting burnt all season. But TJ Watt working his way to recovery for that defense is going to be a very big bright spot for that Steelers team. And the offense, still with the quarterback situation. I mean, Kenny Pickett. I mean, come on now. Joe Flacco threw the amount of touchdowns he has in his career in a couple games compared to Kenny Pickett. I mean, let's be real here. Like, I've said it before, I don't think Kenny Pickett is the answer for this pick for Steelers. I may be wrong. Who knows? I mean, Kenny two gloves, but, you know, just he really wasn't making a huge impact. I mean, if anything, Najee Harris was kind of picking it up more towards the end of the season.
I mean, yeah, we're obviously in agreement here. I know we see all the rumblings that they're seeing. I mean, there's thoughts of maybe Russell Wilson, obviously Justin Fields is, you know, probably one of the big rumors. Well. Personally, I think probably Atlanta, but we'll get into some video about that in the future too. But I mean, obviously there's going to be a new quarterback in Pittsburgh. There's no doubt in my mind there. And honestly, you know, a top quarterback can easily make this an actual playoff team. I know they made the playoffs, but it was a 7 seed. They barely snuck in, barely got in with Mike Tomlin's saving his winning. I mean, not getting a losing record. So I mean, hey, props to them for keeping that little paper record they got on there. But I mean, it's still a failure of a season for the Steelers. I mean, you can't really look at it any other way. I mean, that's just, you know, you make the playoffs, not really much going on there. But arguably, you know, I think you know, they really are a quarterback away. There's a couple teams that we can really say that, and you know, easily they are one of them. All the weapons they have, and you know, a defense, you know, maybe, you know, get rid of some of those watch guys, you know, bring in some, you know, let it be a more consistent group. I think that's all it really takes with the Steelers. But you know, they're trending in the right direction for the most part. We'll just have to wait and see, you know, if they get those right steps moving forward. But you know, going into, I guess, you know, we can't really fault the Bengals. They were dealt a tough hand, you know, obviously with Joe Burrow's injury. I mean, he never really was 100%. I mean, obviously came into the season with an injury. I guess you know, they did start playing good. Obviously that game against the Niners was probably the bright spot of the season. And then obviously the wrist injury, you know, came back Thursday night and wasn't really 100%, and really actually, you know, got that season-ending wrist injury. But I mean, overall, I mean, the quarterback play that did come down to being the, you know, the detrimental point. I mean, hey, Jake Browning, you know, props to him. You know, he wrote the ship for.
He did what he could for the best.
That's exactly. You know, he did what he could. Yeah. He went on his own little insanity run for as long as he could. I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't sustainable. Something like that.
Games, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just wasn't sustainable at the end of the day. So I mean, for them to even get a winning record, they were still in the playoff picture right till the end. So I mean, honestly, I can't fault them. I think it's a I mean, you can't say a win of a season, but it was a decent season. That I mean, I think going into next season, you see, you know, see what they do in the draft, see maybe they can do in free agency. I mean, they're still my favorite to win the North going into next year. It's, you know, it all depends, you know, a healthy Joe Burrow was the difference this year.
Yeah, I mean, like you said about Joe Burrow, I mean, I would start drawing some concern for Joe Burrow. I mean, since his rookie year, I mean, come on, this is his second season-ending injury.
With an ACL tear, come on.
No, I know, but I'm not saying it's his. So I'm just saying, like, I mean, come on, he's already had 2 season-ending injuries. That's already gonna put a huge impact on his health. That's why I kind of be worried as a Bengals fan, you know. I mean, you would expect not to be taking that much hits, especially with this Bengals zone line that, you know, that's kind of known for being a little crappy. Let's not be wrong here, but you know, I still have a lot of hope for Joe Burrow. He is the focal point of this, you know, this Bengals team. I mean, we saw how they are without him. Joe Burrow, he's gonna have a bounce back season. Let's get that in the picture already. And you know, for them being, you know, for you choosing them to win the division next year, it's not ridiculous to say at all whatsoever. But I was, you know, still a little concerned for Joe Burrow. Now moving on to the AFC South with this Texans team that really blew the minds of everyone else. I mean, with CJ Stroud, you know, he, like I said, I've been saying it all season. He proved me wrong after I said he wasn't gonna, you know, do really this good with this Texans team. But him and DeMeco Ryans, that rookie duo coach, rookie quarterback duo, that 1-2 punch really set the tone for this Houston team. Sure, they started off a little slow towards the end of the season, you know, but I mean, CJ Stroud, he was still putting on a show. I mean, he was throwing for 400 yards. I mean, he was really trying to put this team as much as he could, but they're still getting accustomed to. I mean, they were like 0-2, 0-3 before they got the first win, if I'm not mistaken, it's somewhere around that. But come mid-season, a little bit after that, that's where things started clicking. And then, you know, with the rookie dog on the defensive side, Will Anderson Jr., he really put the bright spot on for the defense. You know, we can get into that another time. But Will Anderson is really huge, really impact for that defense. And then Derek Stingley, I mean, he was a rookie last year, right? If I'm not mistaken, once again, Derek Stingley Jr.
You can't quote me on that.
Yeah, but you know, Derek Stingley, like on the defensive backside, that cornerback spot, you know, really blocking down those receivers. I saw that was another bright spot for that young Texas defense. And CJ Stroud with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. I mean, Nico Collins, when Tank Dell got down, Tank Dell was really putting on a show for this receiver core. This receiving core really had no exceptions here, but they got it done when they really needed to. And then when Tank Dell went down, Nico Collins stepped up. So there's really a lot of, you know, hopes and expectations for this Houston team coming in next season. And you know, one thing for Texans fans, you just gotta hope CJ Stroud doesn't go through the sophomore slump.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think there's much concern for him to go through a sophomore slump. I think we see, I mean, he just looks overall prepared. He looked like a veteran. It didn't look like it was a rookie playing, and obviously, I mean, that's why he took the award over Puka Nacua. You know, it pains me, but you know, I honestly, I mean, there's definite cases. I mean, sure, you know, Puka broke those records. I'll leave that aside, but I mean, regardless, it was. It looked like a well-oiled veteran team. Ever since, I think we can say the Steelers game, that's kind of when, you know, people started taking this team serious.
Yeah.
That, you know, I took them in this game. I remember, you know, you had your doubts going into that one, but I mean, that was just about the time. I think that Bucks game too, you know, when that late comeback against Baker, there was just moments here and there that, you know, you really seen flashes for CJ. And I have no concern that he can come back and bring the same energy next season. But moving into the opposite, big disappointment at the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I mean, I don't know what much you can say. It was just an absolute collapse. And they were 8-3 after 12 weeks, I believe, and just one of the worst collapses we've seen I believe 1-4 to end the season, something like that. Just overall disappointment for Jacksonville. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, lots of questions coming in about him. We really haven't seen him live up to that potential. I mean, we saw, obviously he led the Jaguars to the playoffs last year, and obviously, that comeback against the Chargers, which I think a lot of people are really, they're relying too heavily on what he did in that comeback. What have you done for me lately? We need to see he needs a phenomenal season next year, honestly, to me. And there's going to be questions. Is he even going to be the answer in Jacksonville? I know he's, a top pick, those questions, it gets hard to ask that question. But looking at Trevor Lawrence, I haven't really seen enough from him to really say that he's, deserving of, getting into conversations of keeping him around long term. And, we'll just have to see. Overall, I don't remember, they didn't really go through that many injuries, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I don't think it was the injury. They did go through a couple injuries. I'm not wrong about that. But even without the injuries, come on.
Just overall, the play was what diminished near the end.
The whole play, the play calling, what Doug Peterson was cooking up, what this whole team was doing. To finish out,
I'm surprised there's no cause for him to be gone.
Yeah, I would kind of draw some concern with the coaching, not even just the head coach, the whole coaching all around. Come on, finish off the season 1-5 when you're in the top of the division, already had a good chance to secure a spot.
I don't want to put too much on Trevor either, because I know that defense was pretty
the defense really the defense really depleted towards towards mid-season. So obviously not too much pressure on Trevor Lawrence, but at the same time, the offense, it wasn't clicking when it needed to, and that whole collapse, this is just one out of the two teams that collapsed this season, which we'll get into as well a little later on in this video. But the Jacksonville team really not really much to look at here. And like you said, Trevor Lawrence next season, it's really got to open the eyes for this organization to see if Trevor Lawrence is the answer in the long-term future. Now moving on to the next team, the Indianapolis Colts. Now this is a team where you could say it was a W or an L, but especially towards that last game against the Texans. This Colts team, Gardner Minshew was taking the lead here with this Colts team, and they were looking fairly good start of the season. That defense, they're showing some flashes. They're keeping up against some pretty good teams here, and obviously some games where they could have won, but obviously some simple mistakes there. But Gardner Minshew, he really led the pack here for what he could do best, and I'm really excited to see Anthony Richardson.
The main thing you can see, all things considered, sure, Gardner Minshew did his thing, but the fact that this team stayed together after Ant Rich's injury, that's probably the biggest thing to look at. Richardson was playing phenomenal. I know, he had those concerns, the concussions and, not going down when he had to. But, he showed arguably the same flash. He still probably could have had a chance to win Rookie of the Year. Obviously, we saw what CJ did, but who knows what trajectory Richardson was going on. And I think, for them to see what they did with a backup, I think if they would have had Ant Rich, arguably they could have won the division. And if we see, there's a lot of potential moving forward for the Colts.
Yeah, and I was really looking forward to see Ant Rich, put on the show for this Colts team. And, sure, I had my little speculations like, is he not going to do good? But, actually looking into this, he was getting really a lot of hate too early on, right? And the way he was playing, I was really like, thank God, like that he's doing decent. And obviously the injuries that really depleted him here. But, Ant Rich is really a player for next season. I'm really excited to see for him to turn this Colts team around.
I think obviously a lot of potential to look forward for the Colts. Now, obviously, probably, I guess we can't, I would say a disappointment for the Titans, but at the end of the day, it was kind of expected them to be a disappointment to the start. What can you say, man? Just a disappointment overall. Obviously, we see all the regression from Ryan Tannehill, and the one positive that I can think that we can see here is, Will Levis. I'm not going to say, he's a franchise guy just yet, but, same thing. He showed a bunch of flashes. I was hesitant to really even get high on him to the start, but, he really did, prove a lot of people wrong. And obviously, on another negative side, Derrick Henry probably on his way out. He showed probably some flashes. Maybe he's aging near the end of the season, but regardless, it's a tough pill to swallow for Titans fans to see that Derrick Henry's, probably on his way out.
Yeah, like you said, I wrapped it up right there. It was really just a disappointing season for this Tennessee Titans team. I mean, coming into the season, I mean, look, I already said it from the beginning. Look, Ryan Tannehill, he was not gonna stop being like I think I called it. Like I don't think that the Tannehill was gonna get benched later on in the season.
For that, yeah.
Yeah, we were in a consensus, and really Ryan Tannehill was still not expected to start next season. Realistically, it's gonna be Will Levis. And Will Levis, I would say he has the potential to, carry this team around, but when you're losing your star running back like Derrick Henry, that's going to draw a lot of concern for that offense, and then let alone that defense. A lot of depletion going on there, but when they beat a team like the Miami Dolphins, so they're capable of staying in the game against these two teams. I mean, not two teams, these high teams in the league, but it really just comes down to the quarterback play and how the coaching wants to decide moving forward. And now wrapping up the AFC with the West, starting up with the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean. Let's get that right out the way. This was a W season overall for this Chiefs team. I mean, back-to-back champs.
I would think when you win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, back-to-back Super Bowl champions. I mean, since the last time since the Patriots team. I mean, this was a W season overall. Sure, the beginning of the season was a little stumpy here with the receiving core, with the drops, with Mahomes not looking like the Mahomes I used to play. Run game was a little not so good there, and the drops as well. And that defense. That we've had a lot of things about this Kansas City Chiefs defense. After that defense was always known for being mediocre and letting up some big plays. Yeah, and at the end of the day, come mid-season, that was the bright spot. L'Jarius Sneed, Chris Jones, and then Trent McDuffie. Those three players, and then an underrated guy on that defense too, Nick Bolton. They all really stepped up, and then Carl Loftus as well. You got a lot of players on that team on that defense that really stepped up for this Chiefs team when the offense wasn't producing, when the receivers were doing all these drops, and then Rashee Rice picking it up as a rookie receiver for Mahomes as being potential number one target when Kelce's not getting going either. So bright spot there, Kelce. I'm pretty sure he's going to stay another season with the Chiefs. He's not going to look into
he already confirmed
whatsoever.
It.
Yeah, he's already confirmed it. So regardless, WC for the Chiefs, and they're going for that three-peat. So who knows?
Yeah, arguably, I mean, like you said, it did look like a lost season for a bit. I mean, 11-6, the worst regular season in Mahomes' career to this point, and obviously that meant nothing. Go on to win a ring, and yeah, they're. I mean, I said it from the start. I think they're a heavy candidate to go for that 3P, man. But continuing on with the division, just a big surprise with the Raiders to start. I mean, we see the way the season started. I mean, we were pretty low on them. I believe we both had them at the bottom of the division, and I mean to think. Yeah, I mean, no complaints there. But I mean, to think, firing Josh McDaniels and just the way the season was going. I mean, Antonio Pierce was definitely a godsend to this team, and I still have my doubts on how good he's actually going to be as a full-time head coach. I mean, we will wait and see, but this was the right call. I mean, he definitely fixed up the culture there. Obviously, the whole team wanted him, and I think another big thing, they were really held back by the fact that they got Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that's going to come to haunt them from this season. For arguably just brought in because of the Josh McDaniels connection. I mean, honestly, Aiden O'Connell was by far better than him, and we already see he got popped for PEDs. He was playing that shit on PEDs. That's just gonna tell you enough. But I mean, just what could have been for the Raiders, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, without a doubt, I mean, he doesn't have experience as being, an actual coach here, and him moving up for the head coach. We kind of expected it. I mean, he changed the coaching for this Raiders team. They finally brought up a lot of good things here. Max Crosby, who wanted to request a trade and didn't re-sign him, he's gonna be back with the team. And then, if we're being realistic here, I mean, come on. Jokes aside, the Raiders, they're really just a quarterback away from being, not gonna say legit contenders, but for being a team that can actually put up a fight for next.
They're another team in those Justin Fields sweepstakes.
Yeah, Justin Fields, and we said it from earlier in the season, Russell Wilson, which really doubt could happen, but that's just a name to throw in the mix there as well. But a quarterback with the way this defense is looking actually really good now, this Raiders team can look pretty good next season. It's really just all based on how Antonio Pierce decides to scheme everything here. Now moving on, probably another disappointing team here, which is a team that I thought was really gonna make not a huge impact, but the Denver Broncos. I mean, they just get one thing out the way. Russell Wilson with his tenure in little spaz attack there with Denver. It sucks to see how he's treated that season. I mean, Russ was having a pretty good season. I got them going in the 7th seed, going 11-6, which it was looking pretty decent. It was looking good when they're on that 5-game win streak, which was giving me a couple flashes of that Cowboys team from 2018, which I thought was going to look like that as well. But obviously, there were a lot of depletions going out there towards the end of October with the whole scandal with John Elway about Russell Wilson saying that something about his cut. If he doesn't take a pay cut, he's getting benched, this and that. Just the way he was treated. I mean, he was having a bounce back season, let alone for himself. And the Denver
I
Broncos
think
defense,
he still played out like another like 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, I mean, this just shows that Russell Wilson is hard to the game, and then this defense that's usually last season, not 2 seasons ago, if I'm being realistic here, that defense was the focal point why they were in games. Not necessarily now last season. It was the offense. I mean, that defense was getting torched. It was getting burned. PS2, he really couldn't do anything he could. And, that quarterback situation is going to be really detrimental for that Broncos team. And like we said earlier, if they're going to sign free agents, they're going to have to spend a lot of money because this whole Broncos organization, it's in shambles.
I mean, yeah, you put it perfectly there. It was just, I mean, a disaster ever since, the news came out about the Wilson stuff. So, I mean, not really much you could say. I mean, just, exactly the way you put it. It's gonna take a lot of money. It's gonna take a lot of convincing for guys to want to go to Denver. I mean, we'll see what the situation is. Honestly, probably gonna be until Sean Payton finally finds his way out, because his reign has already been a disaster if we're really gonna look at it. But moving into the bottom of the barrel in this division, I mean, arguably just even more disappointing with the Chargers. I mean, hey, they finally fired Brandon Staley after, what was that, the 63 to 20 something grubbing of them from the Raiders to say too. I mean, it was just an absolute disaster ever since then. I mean, to couple that with, Justin Herbert getting hurt for the year, just, everything seemed to be going wrong for them. But of course, I mean, hey, they got Jim Harbaugh. That's obviously, their big prize for being so shit all season. And I think he's going to really get the best out of Justin Herbert if we're really being honest here.
Yeah, I really didn't expect any good. Excuse me, I didn't really expect anything good coming from this Chargers team to start the season. I mean,
playoffs, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of clowned you on that a bit, but it really did pay off. I mean, I don't want to put too much blame on Justin Herbert. I mean, he really did all he could, but I still want to see a lot coming in from Justin Herbert. Coming to next season, especially with the signing of Jim Harbaugh. I really think he and Herbert, they can really put some good use to this Chargers team, but. Like at the end of the day, this is still the Los Angeles Chargers, and sooner or later, whatever time comes, they're still gonna find a way to manage to, somewhat be bad and mediocre. And that wrapping up the AFC conference. Now moving on to the NFC to close out the video. Now, obviously starting off with the East with my team, the Cowboys. I mean, let's just put it there. I mean, once again, regular season warriors that this Dallas Cowboys team is.
Won the division.
I mean, we did win the division after that stump of the Eagles, which we will get into. But I mean, once again, it's not going to deny the fact that we can't capitalize what we did in regular season with Dak Prescott, how great Dak Prescott was playing this season, arguably his best season in a while, with how, that defense that was supposed to be a top 5 defense that, just steadily declined coming to the end of the season, where Dak Prescott had to put this team on his back. I mean, we saw a lot of things here. I mean, against that Eagles game in the beginning, that Dolphins game, that Seahawks game, I want to really get into that. And even that, I'm not even going to count the Bills game because that was both sides of the ball. But, those 3 games are prime examples with the defense. They needed to stop, and they couldn't as well. Dak really couldn't do everything he can. I mean, outplaying his opposing quarterback in these losses, it just shows a lot that this Cowboys team is the discipline and the coaching. Like I said, this is the constant with this Dallas Cowboys team. It's the coaching here, and in that horrible loss against the Packers here. We signed Mike Zimmer to the defense, hopefully retaining some of the key players we've had. Me being a Cowboys fan, I would expect it to be a good season, but the cycle's gonna unfortunately keep repeating. And how the cycle is with this NFC East. We're not going to be the division winner. We see it. It's not going to be a repeat. So it's probably going to be Philly or the Giants.
I don't think we can forget about the Giants, but I mean, yeah, arguably, it's become a cycle with you guys. It's been, just a regular season champion type award, and I think, just it kind of falls apart in the playoffs. And I mean, we'll see, maybe a Mike Zimmer defense can fix that. We'll see if Jerry Jones keeping McCarthy is gonna be for the better. I mean, who knows? But I mean, I think we're in agreement. McCarthy should have been fired. I mean, it's not to try to scapegoat him or anything. I think it's been long enough. Ever since 2020, he just really hasn't lived up to the potential. I wouldn't say potential, but I mean, yeah, it's the Cowboys. You don't expect, but I mean, hey, you want to just be at the top of the league every year. I mean, that's been the expectation for you guys. You haven't lived up for it in a while, but
I mean, 12-5 seasons back to back and not doing anything past
the division. And that's the thing, he's a regular season coach. Apart from what he did with the Packers that one year, he's already just been for the regular season. But hey, it wasn't. You guys didn't have the worst one in this division. We got to see the Philadelphia Eagles, the generational collapse. I mean, we talk about what happened with the Jaguars. This was obviously a lot worse. I mean, they were 10-1, and to end up losing, I believe they ended up going 1-6 to end the season, something like that. Just
1-5, 1-5.
If we count the playoff game too, I guess. But yeah, I mean, just an absolute disaster. I mean, sure, they stuck around and made the playoffs. That was easily going to happen with whoever got second place in the East. But I mean, regardless, I mean, sure, those so many different storylines. I mean, it's a little unfair to them. I will say, with the whole Big Dom narrative, the whole Sirianni. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was getting put on Sirianni that I do think was a little bit too much, and just all the locker room stuff. I mean, it's. There's just so many different stories coming on me. Regardless, there's a lot of questions coming in about Jalen Hurts. The leader he really is. All he does is speak in Instagram quotes after losing a game. So I mean, there's a lot of looking in the mirror in this team. As much as I do want to try to defend Nick Sirianni, he's obviously gonna be on the hot seat going into next season. Just like McCarthy that we just talked about. But I mean, regardless, very much a disappointment, especially coming off a Super Bowl losing season from last year.
Yeah, I mean, after the first matchup against the Cowboys here, I mean, how salty it was. I even called them, and it was going to be sooner or later until this Eagles team gets embarrassed. And then I called it right then on the dot, especially with that defense depleting, which is another huge focal point of why this Eagles collapsed. That defense
probably not drop off too much. You called down the absolute.
I called it a lot with this Eagles team. Call me how salty I was, but I was freaking right, man, with this Eagles team, and we saw how to capitalize into the playoffs against that Buccaneers team. And I'm moving on with the other two disappointing teams, the New York Giants. I mean, it's another thing Kutu I called it with this Giants team. I mean, come on, I knew Daniel Jones wasn't gonna do what he was gonna do, and then him getting injured. Aside from all that, this Giants team, it was really all over the place. Sure, Tommy DeVito, he had his little insanity run in the first couple towards midseason, and obviously all that getting shut down there. But this Giants team finishing off 6-11 could have been worse for this Giants team. Don't get me wrong, but there's still a lot of things to come into play here, and then the huge contract from Daniel Jones. That, don't get me wrong, I think we can really agree with this, and everybody with a decent football can know Daniel Jones is the reason why the quarterback market got so messed up these past couple years with the whole contract situations and everything. With all these quarterbacks requesting more money now, and then look how he.
That's the problem. He set the market at 40, and if you see a guy like Daniel Jones getting 40, I mean, who knows what they're gonna give someone like C.J. Stroud.
I mean, I would expect him to get a bag if we're being realistic here, but this Giants team, like I said before, this quarterback situation is really gonna come into play once again. That it's a young, don't get me wrong, their defense too. It's young, it has potential as well. They did what they could, but looking at this offense, that quarterback, if they want to stick with Daniel Jones, which they most likely are, if they're not just gonna get rid of all that money, it's gonna be a lot to play coming into next season.
I mean, that's the problem with this. I mean, they genuinely do have a playoff-ready team aside from Daniel Jones. And, who knows? Maybe they do kind of have a resurgence. Maybe Daniel Jones becomes, comeback player of the year next season, and maybe, does something to lead him. Maybe, the Giants will be the ones to take the division. But, I'm not expecting that. I don't think any of us is expecting that. And I mean, hey, you definitely called them being a disappointment. At least, you didn't get the right place that they'd get, because I called them getting third, you called them getting last, and the team that actually got last going into the Commanders. I mean, just another year disappointment. I think it's already expected. They'll probably pick up last place in the East. I mean, we'll see what ends up happening moving forward, but I think a lot of a big reason here, sure, I mean, Ron Rivera definitely, as much, we love him from his time at the Panthers, but, he's definitely been washed ever since, he got to Washington. And having Eric Bieniemy, that's just someone that I've always been very high on. If we're really going to look at it, he was also a very big part in, a collapse in this Washington team, because, honestly, that defense was, probably the strongest point that they had. Now we look at the offense, and Sam Howell was honestly, really being held back. They were calling so many run plays. It was, I mean, they really weren't really giving a shot for Sam Howell. Now, if we really look at that O-line, most sack quarterback in the league, he was destined to fail from the start. And, we see the schemes Bieniemy built up for this offense were atrocious. I mean, I was...
Let alone that with that O-line as well. I mean, that O-line really wasn't helping Howell's case as well either.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really paying attention to the schemes and all this. I was thinking, why isn't Bieniemy the one? Why aren't we firing Rivera and getting Bieniemy in there? Thankfully, I mean, I actually, seeing this, there's a big reason they didn't, and there's a big reason why Bieniemy's out of a job in looking into the season. They hired Cliff Kingsbury. He's a lot more innovative. We've seen what he's been able to do with Mahomes in college. He had Caleb Williams. Maybe that's another reason they're trying to coax getting that number 1 pick, get Caleb Williams. And obviously he had Kyler Murray. So we'll see. Do they stick it out with Sam Howell? Do they get a guy like Drake May or Jaden Daniels? There's a lot of potential looking at Washington moving forward.
Yeah, really, and really looking at the quarterback too with Sam Howell, I said before, stick with Howell, man, because he has a lot of potential. He was looking really, really good. You just got to build around him, and who knows if they decide to pull a little oopsie daisy and get Jaden Daniels in the draft? Who knows? But I would want the Commanders to stick with Sam Howell, see what Dan Quinn could go with him. I still think that Dan Quinn hire it's a pretty serviceable hire. I mean, I still got my little love for that. I mean, come on, he turned a horrible Cowboys defense to arguably top 10, top 12 defense in the past 3 years. So what he's able to do as a head coach, yeah, and then that happened. But regardless of that, Dan Quinn, it's still a very good hire in my opinion. Maybe a little recency bias here and there, but this Commanders team, I would expect it to a little bit much better. But it just comes down to what that front office wants to do with the quarterback play. And now moving on to the NFC North with the team that you called having a phenomenal season, the Detroit Lions. That culture for this Lions team, it really set the tone for this organization and the fans alone. I mean, that win against the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 1, I want to say that was kind of the momentum changer right then and there. That early on in the season, you could say, I would still say that was the moment to call right there. Jared Goff, he was looking phenomenal. Jahmyr Gibbs, everyone was skeptical on why the Lions decided to draft a running back early on in the first round.
They weren't even using him at the start of the season, but
yes,
the usage got in there.
Yeah, they're complaining about that. Wasn't using him. Dan Campbell, then he decided, Jahmyr's pretty good. Let's keep using him. And look what happened. That run game, that 1-2 punch with him and Montgomery, it was really bad for these defenses, especially for those run defense. I mean, they were just running through him. Seeing Jahmyr Gibbs finally getting the attention he deserves, finally him picking it up, really lets us see there. And that defense, who was historically known to not be as well good for this Detroit Lions team, it was getting the job done. Not necessarily towards the end of the season.
Let's look at the second half. They really start falling apart.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. First half of the season, they're really looking good. Second half, really falling apart, putting too much on Jared Goff. And like I said before, Jared Goff is the quarterback. Too much pressure on him. He's not going to get it done. They made a far run in the playoffs. It should have been in the Super Bowl if Dan Campbell decided not to, have his big balls and just be ballsy all over there. But regardless, for Detroit Lions, I would say it was a pretty W season wrapped around.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, got that playoff run started against my Rams, and as much as it hurts me for that. I mean, yeah, I definitely expected this from the Lions, and what you say about Jared Goff, he was put in a perfect position. How sustainable will that be? We'll wait and see looking into next season, but give him his flowers for this season. He led the charge. A lot of people expect him to just be a bridge quarterback, and he's obviously probably the franchise guy moving forward in Detroit. And just overall, like you say, that running back duel. Didn't even talk about Sam Laporta, that gem that they found in the draft with him. And just in general, they built this team so phenomenally. I forget their general manager, but he's a guy that they picked up from the Rams a couple years back. Brad Holmes. Brad Holmes was a huge part in this team, obviously. In the draft, all the gems that they picked up, looking back, like Aiden Hutchinson a couple years ago, just everything just coming perfectly going into this season. And we'll see how sustainable this will be, because obviously looking into this division, the Packers are right behind them. Obviously they're way ahead of schedule, the youngest team in the league, I believe, right now. And Christian, your call on Jordan Love honestly came out to perfection, if we're being honest here. I mean, I expected it to, look, I had great hopes for Jordan Love. I expected it to wait just a little longer for him to really, come into his own, but did what he had to do, got into the playoffs this year.
I called him winning a playoff game, but at what cost? I called him winning a playoff game this year, but at what cost? At what cost, man?
Just in general, just a huge surprise, obviously, beat up on my Rams when we didn't even have Matthew Stafford, and that was another big reason why they ended up making the playoffs. But just overall, just an absolute win of a season for the Packers. Far ahead of schedule. They expected to still be in a rebuild, and now they're definitely probably a contender going into next season. I think I've seen them. They probably have pretty good Super Bowl odds. With good reason. See what they do in the draft, see what they can cook up in free agency. But this is a really scary team moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the take for Jordan Love that I had on him early on season, excuse me, I call it right then. I knew he was going to have a huge impact to this Packers team. Sure, it didn't look early on that he was doing this, but towards midseason and the end of the season, what Jordan Love was able to do, he really was spot on. And then the statement he made against my Cowboys team, got to give him props to there. Starting next season, I mean, they finally found the third generational quarterback of the Packers team, and Jordan Love. He's probably going to do really well for this team. Now looking at another team with another quarterback situation, the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, just to start out with Big Kirko, man. I mean, before his injury, it was his ACL, right? If I'm not mistaken. His Achilles. There you go. So before his Achilles, Big Kirko, he was doing really well this season. He was doing what he can with his Minnesota Vikings team. Sure, there were some moments there where Kirk Cousins, he wasn't looking his best, but he was doing all he could. I mean, not only him, the defense was also not doing its best that it can. But Danielle Hunter at the pass defense, he really had a really big season for the Vikings team, which kind of kept them in the game for the most part. But after Kirk went down, that whole quarterback play with Nick Mullins and who I think it was
insanity run at Josh Dobbs, man.
Yeah, Josh Dobbs. That's Josh Dobbs actually. I mean, that whole insanity run with him and what he was able to do, and then obviously the drop off, and then with Nick Mullins, this Vikings team, they're still in playoff picture, a little towards the end of the season, but that Lions game really called quits right then and there. So this Vikings team with Kirk probably on his way out, this Vikings team is gonna have a lot of moves
because they know how instrumental he was to their success. So now they're really fighting, and obviously, if they don't get Kirk, who knows what happens to Jefferson? So honestly, it's going to be really important. They're going to be fighting hard to keep Kirk, but obviously we see how important he is. Other teams are seeing how important he was to the Vikings offense. Teams like the Steelers and the Falcons, two teams that they're going to be huge in free agency. A sleeper team, even the Patriots that we saw, they could decide to move the number 3 pick to maybe get a quarterback. There's so many different opportunities. The Vikings got to be really smart with how they handle Kirk. And moving to the bottom of the division, and the Bears, once again they kind of found a spot down there, and it's been a big disappointment. I expected to see a big step up from Justin Fields. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I mean, he showed flashes, don't get me wrong. That Cardinals game and that Falcons game, he definitely did show capabilities, and I really do. I'm still a firm believer that they should hold on to him. We obviously talk about this a lot. Keep Fields, draft Harrison, see what you can do, and let him play out his rookie deal. But at the end of the day, it's probably not what's gonna happen. Ryan Poles is probably gonna go in a different direction, and we'll see where he ends up. Obviously, the Falcons are a big contender for his services, but I mean, just overall, it was just a really disappointing year for the Bears. I mean, I see DJ Moore, big bright spot for them, picking him up in that deal with the Falcons. But I mean, I guess the defense, they did at least pick up. They did get a little better on production ever since they picked up Montez Sweat. So you can see that defense, building things towards the future. I know we were kind of confused on why they made that deal, but at the end of the day, it's something that's going to work out in the future, and we'll see what happens, once they make those deals in the draft.
Yeah, not even the draft. I mean, the quarterback situation with Justin Fields, to see what's going to happen, if he's going to move on, is he on a Falcon? That's where everyone wants him to go.
Out, man.
Yeah, he's most likely out. Whatever team it is in the mix to run in there, and then you will see with the Bears, if they're going to draft Caleb Williams, they suck at developing players. I would expect Caleb to be a bust with that Bears team. He doesn't even want to play with them. That's why I want Marvin Harrison Jr. there if G. Fields does decide to stay. But for the looks of it, he's probably moving in his way on. The Bears are still going to be poverty. Now moving on to the NFC South, it's probably the team that no one expected at all to even make playoffs would be good. The Tampa Bay Bucks. Now let's just give a big shout out to Baker. That once again, some games where I was saying Baker was getting it done, this and that, he wasn't, but he was stepping it up and finally giving Baker the praise that he deserves, man. I mean, a lot of people expected the Saints to win this division, and the Saints, they ended up getting the same record as the Bucks, 9-8. But Baker Mayfield, he was really putting on a show, especially with Mike Evans. A lot of people, Mike Evans is 1,000-yard streak is done. But no, Baker. If anything, Baker helped them more. If anything, sure, there's a couple missed throws with him and Evans. Baker was still a little bit here and there, but Mike Evans was a big bright spot for their most consistent receiver in the league. You can even throw that in the mix here. I would expect Baker to get a pretty good contract coming into this offseason. He really did all he could for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, especially getting a win against that Philadelphia Eagles team, which doesn't say much and everyone pretty much expected it. But I would say overall, it's a pretty decently overall good season for this Tampa Bay Bucks team, let alone in a horrible NFC South division.
Yeah, and that was the difference. Yeah, I mean, to be in a division like this, it benefited them a lot, but I mean, regardless, they probably could have been a playoff team a little better, and maybe even some other divisions. Who knows? But at the end of the day, just like we say, that resurgence of Baker Mayfield just really great to see. Even though, I mean, you give a lot of props to Mike Evans. I mean, we see, he got into those drop issues near the end of the season. So, I mean, that doesn't really matter. He's still gonna get a really handsome contract, whatever ends up happening. We see, they've been far apart on contract talks. We're still gonna have to wait and see what ends up happening. And it's not even confirmed that they're gonna end up sticking with Baker. What that situation is gonna be. But regardless, it was a lot of a surprise of a season for the Bucks. I expected to be at the bottom of the division. I think I had them at 5 wins. So obviously, big ups to them to really just turn into a surprise. And looking at the Saints, I mean, like you said, 9-8, still that same record. It ended up on a tiebreaker. I mean, they ended up beating the Bucks, I believe, in week 17. They really still kept those playoff hopes alive. Believe they played that game against the Falcons that, if the Bucks would have lost to the Panthers, which obviously they weren't gonna, but they still had a chance to win the division. But a couple mistakes here and there. Obviously, we look back at that 17-point blown lead against the Packers. Obviously, a big Thursday night game that they lost to the Rams. Just a lot of hiccups down the road that really did hurt the Saints. And unfortunately, the whole situation. I mean, hey, Derek Carr, he did what he had to do, and he played his part, man.
Yeah, I really thought Derek Carr was going to really big impact against the Saints team. I mean, all his tenure with the Raiders, I've said it a lot of times. I mean, he was really he never had a good defense. He always had a bottom defense in his career. And moving to the Saints team, they had they usually have a good track record with having a pretty decent defense, and that's what I thought was going to happen. But if anything, Derek Carr probably played worse with New Orleans, and he did all he could, unfortunately, but it wasn't really all that he could do. This defense couldn't do their best. They couldn't keep up with Derek Carr's bureaucracy. He tried, don't get me wrong, but it's gonna be a lot of changes here. What's gonna go on in the offseason, and see what Brandon Allen wants to do with this team. And now moving on with another disappointing team that, understatement, this whole division was disappointing, but the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, let's just get straight to the point. Arthur Smith was the reason this team was not getting back, and the quarterback play. I mean, not using your two best players. I mean, Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. I mean, Bijan, you saw in the early season, he was doing good in the run game, and then you decide not to utilize them in a couple games, and then you see why are the Falcons losing? Oh, why is nothing going on here? Well, Arthur Smith, it's because you're not using Bijan Smith in the run game, and let alone Kyle Pitts at the tight end. I mean, Drake London too. Drake London was another, another guy from USC that we both really enjoyed looking at. Drake London, he was having a good season for them as well, but obviously the quarterback play really impacted him not getting too much touches, too much impacts on the team there. And in that defense, big shout out to Jesse Bates. He had a really great season for the Falcons and that defense, but it really wasn't enough for this Falcons team. After that Super Bowl choke, this Falcons team really hasn't been the same. And with Arthur Smith gone, who knows who the next head coach? Who knows what's really going to happen with this Falcons team? It's really just the quarterback play that's going to determine everything.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point I want to make. It's they're one of those teams that they're a quarterback away, and we'll see what they end up doing. I really think Raheem Morris is gonna. Yeah. I think he's gonna really shape up this team up really well. He's obviously he's gonna do great with the defense. It's just wait and see. Obviously, he brought in a bunch of his Rams guys. I believe his offensive coordinator is someone he brought in from the Rams. So I mean, regardless, I honestly do have high hopes for the Falcons. It's just to wait and see what that quarterback play can be. I mean, they have all the weapons. It's just to wait and see what if they can utilize them right this time around. Of course, you talk about disappointments. I don't think there was any bigger disappointment than the Carolina Panthers. And I mean, Bryce Young was set up to fail from the start. Just from the top to the bottom, David Tepper, the worst owner in the NFL, no patience with coaches. Obviously, it was a bad decision from the start to get Frank Reich, but don't even give him a shot. I believe, was it after 11 games, he was canned. And I mean, sure, there was all the talks. I mean, the unfair talks about Bryce Young, being a bust and all that. He has no line. His only real weapons are Adam Thielen, and that's about it, I think. So, I mean, and that's a late 30s Adam Thielen. So, do what you want with that. I'm not trying to knock Adam Thielen, but I mean, when that's your top receiver, it's, what can you do with that? And sure, the defense, there's those positive spots. I mean, you got J.C. Horn and Brian Burns, who Brian Burns is probably on his way out this offseason. It was top to bottom, it was just a really dysfunctional franchise. And This front office has a lot to do. And I mean, I pray for Dave Canales, man.
Yeah, and not even, just add more salt to the wound here. I mean, come on, worst record in the league, and you don't even have the first pick. I mean, that just adds even more detriment for this team, especially with all the weapons that, not even the weapons, I mean, with all the help that Bryce Young needs, if he wants to have a 6 year. I mean, Tapper, I just don't see him doing any well for this Carolina Panthers team. Now finally moving on to the final division of the NFC West, the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, look, Brock Purdy, all the hate that you can, all the jokes aside, I mean, he really did what he could with this team, leading this team to 12-5, being Mr. Relevant. Sure, still count the narrative that, look, his weapons are the reason is there, Debo's the reason, McCaffrey's the reason, Kittle, not really Kittle, he really wasn't, having a huge impact this season, and Ayuk too, which, Ayuk was, I think, was a bright spot for this offense. I mean, Ayuk, he's an underrated receiver in this league. He really needs more traction here. I think he's just overshadowed by McCaffrey and Debo. But Ayuk, he really set the tone.
I mean, he's
for this
consensus number one receiver. I mean, sure, Debo's the big name, I guess, if you want to look at it. But I mean, the thing with Ayuk, I mean, he's easily their number one, and obviously that was a big reason why there was so much concern of why he wasn't utilized in the Super Bowl. And obviously, there's calls, maybe he wants out, which that's going to be terrible for Purdy's weapons if that ends up happening.
Yeah, and we saw what happens when Purdy doesn't have his weapons. I mean, when Debo was out, Trent Williams out, McCaffrey was out, that three-game losing streak really set the tone for that 49ers team. Once everyone came back, all of a sudden Purdy started finally doing good. I'm still not gonna, discredit Purdy for what he did this season. He started a very good season. Under that Super Bowl, he really just couldn't set the tone once again after having a 10-point lead, especially with the coaching with Kyle Shanahan. You still expect this 49ers to be as good next season, but it all depends how, especially with him in this contract, for next season or the next for the 1 or 2 years here. We'll see how it all plays out with the weapons and see what they're going to do.
Yeah, and that's what I said in the Super Bowl recap. This is going to be, the determining factor. What this season's going to be, I mean, what you always talk about with Dak, that, this is going to be the year. This is going to determine a lot. I mean, this is the determining year for the 49ers. What can they do now that they have, this is their last year paying Brock Purdy, like $500K or something like that, even less than that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do what you can. I mean, if they don't win it all this year, I think it's gonna be a disastrous 2025, I believe. But I mean, we'll have to wait and see what they end up doing, because they got a really tough division to look into second place. Nobody expected us here, but the Rams got second, 10-7, exactly how I called it going into the year. Not the way I expected it, but I'll take it nonetheless. Getting into the playoffs as the 6th seed. Obviously the focal point to look into here is the front office and how great they are at drafting. Looking at Puka Nacua and Kobe Turner, Byron Young too. I mean, just a phenomenal draft class that's going to set this team up for the future. And obviously we look at Kyren Williams last season, just just the core is set up here perfectly. Wait and see what they end up doing in the draft. I know I have my own things to think about. Obviously, the main thing is going to be corner. That I always talk about Deion Kendrick. I don't want to always let him be my scapegoat, but he gives me reason to let him be my scapegoat. So I mean, there's a lot of different things to look. The resurgence of Matt Stafford, which I can't say enough of. What he did for this team to. I mean, we see how detrimental it was when he ended up going down. I believe it was that Cowboys game that hurt him. And obviously he had to miss the Packers game. But just overall, it was just a phenomenal season. To get into the playoffs, sucked to lose that game. But at the end of the day, we're set up phenomenally for the future. And can't wait to see what Les does in this draft and in the free agency.
Yeah, obviously, Rams really exceeded expectations here. I mean, even the both of us really didn't see the Rams going anywhere. And obviously, like you said, the resurgence of Matthew Stafford and the way Puka Nacua was able to, burst out with, Cooper Kupp having a slight decline this season. And,
which I forgot too. I mean, just, because I talk about free agency and the receivers, re-signing DeMarcus Robinson, that's also obviously going to be a really big thing for next season.
Yeah, DeMarcus Robinson, he had some clutch plays, pretty much most of the games started coming back. And then Kyren Williams, another fifth round steal in that run game, which really set the tone for this Rams team. Obviously, shit went wrong in the playoff, the refs, this and that, this whole thing. Rams probably should have won that game, but future is bright for this Rams team. Not so bright for the Seahawks team, though. I mean, I call them once again, not having a slight. I think I called them.
No, you had them in the playoffs as the 7.
Yeah, yeah. I think did I have them at 10 wins or 9 wins? I'm not.
Yeah, 10 wins.
Yeah, so kind of repeating the same record, and obviously Geno Smith. What can I say? I mean, Geno Smith. He had his
beat
games.
the Eagles for you.
He didn't have his games. He did beat the Eagles for me, which really, really, really helped me. I really praise Geno for that. But obviously, Geno really wasn't able to get it done where he really needed to. I mean, both games against those Rams, too, those are bright spots that really looking into there. Geno Smith, he wasn't really getting an impact there. That's what I'm saying. Geno really wasn't getting any action there against that Rams team, and it really showed. It really did show. And, you know, that one, and I think the last matchup between you guys, he was driving that Seahawks team, and then I think he threw a pick or something. No, he didn't throw a pick.
That was the missed field goal.
It was the missed field goal. Yeah, there you go. He was getting the job there. Geno did all he could against that there, but you know Myers just missed the field goal, and obviously those two games really impacted it, especially coming with playoff positionings. But there's a lot of things going around with this Seahawks team. Coming to next season, I'm pretty sure Geno Smith's gonna get the start. Contract restructured here, especially with that young defense. That's gonna be a really, really, really huge impact coming into next season. Once again, just a team, and it really comes to the quarterback play that's going to determine their season.
Yeah, and another team to look at about quarterback play. I mean, look at the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, we had so many concerns. You know, what are they going to do with Kyler? Or should they just sit him and, you know, tank? And, you know, we were thinking, you know, are they going to get Marvin? They're still in a perfect position to get Marvin Harrison, which, you know, to go 4-13, you know, I guess, you know, this is basically what we expected. I mean, I had him only winning 2 games. So, hey, you know, they exceeded my expectation for what it's worth. But for Kyler to come back, you know, he played stellar. You know, I can't believe there were still questions of should they move on from him. But I mean, regardless, it's just they're setting themselves up perfectly. I really do think that for them to, you know, I guess, you know, you look at a 4-13 season, it's like damn, that was shit. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, that's kind of exactly what they needed. You know, a tank year, and I mean, they're setting themselves up perfectly for Kyler to probably have some success. I know that defense is something else that, you know, they're probably going to have to address that a lot in the draft, and, you know, maybe free agency. I don't know who's going to want to go to Arizona, but I mean, we'll see. There's a lot of there's some holes, but I definitely do think they're in a position to you know, have some success this offseason.
Yeah, obviously retaining Kyler, which we said before, Kyler Murray staying with this team is going to be the reason why this Cardinals team is going to have a bounce back. You just need to build some weapons around Kyler Murray. Sure, you had Hollywood Brown, Rondale Moore, but those aren't some big name receivers. Sure, they had a bigger impact towards the end of the season, especially against that Philly game. That really, really helped the Cowboys as well too. And then the run game with James Conner. James Conner is probably the bigger piece in that offense as well, other than Kyler Murray. But building around Kyler Murray, rebuilding that defense right then and there, would not expect to be a huge start. I mean, it's gonna be a quick start if we want to really get there, but keeping Kyler Murray and see what that front office can do with the weapons and this Cardinals team, it's really gonna look good, especially with Kyler Murray leading them.
Yeah, but obviously that's going to wrap this up. I don't even want to look at how long this video was. It definitely stretched this out a lot more than what we thought, but I mean, hey, that's what it takes when you're gonna go over all 32 teams. And obviously, you know, a lot of surprises. I didn't even look that good at what our predictions were, but those were probably pretty damn cooked as well. So at the end of the day, you know, it was just another phenomenal season. This is basically going to close the book on the 23-24 season. As for us, obviously moving forward, we're gonna have a lot of draft coverage. I mean, we'll see how much we do. I know we're not gonna go all, you know, mock draft 1.0, 2.0. We'll probably, you know, give you some analysis on some positions and actually give a full mock draft, at least of the first round. But, you know, some free agency news, all this stuff, you know, it's gonna actually get some off-season content. So of course, thank you guys for watching. Hope you like and subscribe, and we'll see you back soon for the next ones.